Hello and welcome. Today we're diving into one of the most, well, let's just say one of the trickiest stories in the Bible. A story that, on the surface, seems to celebrate being selfish.
You've got this moment of pure crisis. 5 women refuse to help their friends. And somehow, the story paints them as the heroes. It can feel really cold, maybe even a little cruel.
I mean, this seems to break every rule of kindness we're ever taught. So, what is really going on here? All right, let's get into it.
So the setup is pretty simple. 10 bridesmaids are waiting for a groom to show up. 5 of them run out of oil for their lamps, but the other 5 refuse to share. And because of that, their friends get locked out of the wedding feast forever. It just feels wrong, right? But as we're about to see, we might be missing the entire point. You see, our first big clue to solving this puzzle isn't found in our modern ideas of ethics. Nope, it's hidden in ancient history, specifically Galilean wedding customs from about 2,000 years ago.
Now, this was a long, really unpredictable affair. After the betrothal, the groom would go to his father's house to build a home for his new bride. But, and this is the key part, only the groom's father got to decide when that home was ready. This could take a year, maybe more. So the bride and her bridesmaids had absolutely no clue when the groom would finally arrive.
The crucial thing to get here is the complete and total uncertainty. The bridesmaids had one job and one job only: be prepared for a long, undefined wait. Because when the father finally gave the thumbs up, the groom would lead a surprise procession to get his bride, usually in the middle of the night. So being ready, that wasn't just a suggestion. It was their entire purpose for being there. Okay, so our second clue has to do with the key evidence at the very center of the story: the actual physical lamps and the oil they needed. And this is where practicality kicks in. We're not talking about some massive torches here. These were tiny, palm-sized clay lamps. One single fill would only burn for a couple of hours, tops. So if your one job is to wade through a potentially very long night, well, carrying an extra supply of oil wasn't just a good idea, it was absolutely essential. This totally redefines what wise and foolish mean here. This isn't about being smart versus dumb. The wise were prudent. They were far-sighted. They planned for the long haul. The foolish, on the other hand, were short-sighted and careless. They basically gambled that the groom would show up quick, a lazy, really risky assumption to make. But we have to remember, this is a parable. The physical objects, the lamps, the oil, they're not just objects. They represent something so much deeper. Just think about it for a second. What is so deeply personal, so much a part of who you are, that it's physically impossible to share it, no matter how badly you might want to? The thinking here is that the oil symbolizes something deeply internal, a real, living relationship with God. It represents a spiritual life that you have to cultivate personally, patiently, over a long, long time. It's not something you can just grab in an emergency. So, once we start seeing the oil as this inner, personal life, well, that refusal to share is suddenly and completely reframed. It's not about hoarding a physical resource at all. It's kind of like asking a marathon runner to give you half their endurance on the final lap, or asking a scholar to just pour their years of study into your brain right before a big exam. You just can't do it. Character, wisdom, trust, these are things that are earned over time, and they just cannot be transferred. So the refusal, the no, it isn't an act of selfishness. It's a statement of a harsh but very true spiritual reality. The wise bridesmaids are basically saying, look, my own preparation is just enough for me. I don't have any extra to give you because nobody can do your inner work for you. And what's really cool is how this illustrates the parable's unique role. See, it's nestled between 2 other stories about being ready. One is about faithfully doing your outward duties, and the other is about using your God-given gifts. But this story, the 10 virgins, it zeroes in on the one thing the others don't: the state of your inner life. And here is the story's chilling warning. Before that cry came at midnight, you couldn't have told them apart. They all had lamps, they were all waiting, they even all fell asleep. The fatal difference was completely invisible. It just goes to show you that outward appearances of faith can be really deceiving. It's the inner reality that ultimately matters. So, all of this is building to the parable's final and pretty sobering conclusion, which, it turns out, isn't really about those 10 virgins at all. When the foolish virgins finally get back, The door to the wedding feast is closed. And this isn't just, a minor inconvenience. This is permanent. It signifies that the opportunity to prepare doesn't last forever. That window of time, it had closed. And then the groom's final words are maybe the most devastating in the entire story. He doesn't say, "You're late," or, "Hey, you don't have enough oil." He says, "I do not know you." And that reveals the real issue was never about the oil. The lack of oil was simply the proof that they didn't have a real relationship with him to begin with. So in the end, the parable turns the spotlight away from the characters in the story and shines it directly on us. The real question isn't whether the wise were selfish, but whether we ourselves are prepared. It forces us to ask, is my faith just an empty lamp? A bunch of outward actions? Or is there genuine oil, a real and living inner connection that will be ready when the call finally comes? And really, that's the question we're all left with.